Welcome back to Cherry Picking, Cherries fans. Hope you're all well. And it's been a while since we've done this, but he's still here. Here is our main man, Manny. How you doing, Manny?
All good, Craig, all good. And it has been a long time. I've been waiting to come back and do a little picking. And there's certainly a lot of cherries to be picked, maybe a few bones. And yeah, let's get picking. That's all I can say, really.
Well, I tell you what, let's start off with there's been so much time between our game with Spurs in the Premier League to this game this weekend against Liverpool. It's just felt, well, it'll be interesting to get your take on it as well, because in a way, a lot of people will look at this as players arrested. The African Cup of Nations hasn't really had that much of effect on us, and that we should be fresh, raring to go. But on the spin side, Manny, do you feel that the momentum we was having? Yes, we got beat by Spurs in that last Premier League game, but the momentum we had, do you feel that that might be lost, or do you feel that that break has probably done the team some good?
I would say, it has. Obviously, it isn't really, ideal to lose a game before a break like this. And you definitely want to um, go into the break having won your game. But I'd like to think that after the excellent run that you had under Areola, a defeat to Tottenham will give you a chance to analyse where you went wrong.
Yeah.
Because let's take a look at everything. I mean, it is quite fair to say, and I do not want to jump the gun or tempt fate, but you pretty much have guaranteed yourselves survival, and I'm sure you'll be looking to try and go a little bit higher up the table. And now that everything seems to have clicked or started to click under Areola, you'll be looking to try to maintain that formula. There will be some occasions, like the Spurs game, for example, where the formula might not work. Several chances you lot had. I believe you had a goal that was disallowed near the end for offside. It wasn't Atara because I think he had gone off with an injury. Fortunately or not, he was able to make the Burkina Faso squad for the AFCON. So I think you've said it perfectly. Not too much in terms of that tournament having affected you lot very much. And I think that's going to be an opportunity for Areola to analyse what exactly went wrong during that game and what can be done. The only problem is, with the defence being an issue again, while it is good to see Morara Neto coming back to something like the form he showed during last season when he put in some fine performances and was rewarded with the captaincy under Gary O'Neill, I think he is still capable of a shaky moment here or there. The fact that Lloyd Kelly is now injured and you got a bit of a crisis at left back doesn't really help. So the window could be an opportunity to really talk about maybe not necessarily so much in terms of player outgoings, but who could possibly come in. And all I can also say is the injured players that you have on your roster cannot come back into the team soon enough. I know you've got Alex Scott in, not that Alex Scott, obviously, but another one. And I can't wait to see Tyler Adams play. USA captain, he's been out too long.
Yeah, most definitely. And, it'll be good to have Tyler Adams back. He shows so much promise. He's good. He was a good player for Leeds. He was an outstanding player. I did question why we signed him because we needed bodies at that time, earlier on in the season. But I do believe that, we've got a sign in our hands that, can really propel the club forward even more. And everything's coming together. But, I said before this game against Liverpool, and I've said it to Peter Hooton from the farm, do go and watch that after this show, guys. I did say to him that this is probably the perfect time to play Liverpool because no Mo Salah, of course, lots of injuries. And then I thought about our own defence. And, of course, Kirkez injured. Max Aarons, is he going to be back and fit? We shall see. That left back position, if Max Aarons is back, you've got to say that probably Smithy is going to move over to the left-hand side. And then we've got the centre-back pairing. Zabania is going to definitely be a shoo-in. But of course, Marco Senesi is suspended for this game against Liverpool. And that is going to put it onto Chris Mepham's shoulders. I would be surprised if it's anybody else. But Mepham hasn't really shone too much. There was a point at the start of last season, and again, it was something that I was knocked for by a couple of people in the Bournemouth community, that I didn't think that Mepham was up to the quality of the Premier League. I think he did well, last season, but again, that same, concern is in my head because the performance against QPR was not good from Mepham. And of course, he is a player that could be leaving. And we'll come on to the people that could be leaving in a moment. But do you feel that it's going to be a bit of a makeshift defence, with the injuries we've got? And it's felt like that against Spurs. And, moving forwards, we need to get Kirkes back. We need to, is Ouattara going to play at left back? I don't think he did a terrible job, actually. I think, he was decent enough. But, do you feel that it's going to probably be a makeshift defence again? Well, it is going to be, but for the next couple of games, really.
You know something, Craig? When it comes to makeshift defences, as an Arsenal fan, sadly, I'm pretty, well versed with that because we're in a situation right now where we've got several of our defenders either injured or out of action. We've got our Tommy gun, Takahiro Tomiyasu, playing for Japan in the Asian Cup. We've got Jurien Timber injured. We've had to have Jakub Kiwior, the Polish centre-back, deputising at left-back. Left-back's always a troublesome issue. I mean, we saw it fit to loan Kieran Tierney out to Real Sociedad, and he's pretty much shot down all possibility of coming back to us. I think it's fair to say that he is not fond of Mr. Arteta, and to be brutally honest, I wouldn't blame the poor bloke. And we also had an issue where last season, because we lost William Saliba, we had to have Rob Holding, now, of course, at Crystal Palace, and that poor bloke's also injured, and Kiwior deputising, and neither of them really were able to, cut the mustard when it mattered. So everything seems to be makeshift. And when you have a manager who is also rather, eccentric enough, for want of a nicer word, to play Thomas Partey at right back because he wants that inversion, having a makeshift defence is not fun. And there have been times when fellow high flyers Aston Villa have had to field something like a makeshift defence as well. I mean, at one occasion they had John McGinn playing at left back. Never again is what he would say. And, losing the former Cherry Tyrone Mings has definitely not helped. That poor fellow, I think, will be out for the whole season. So without him, that leadership at the back is not really there. And, I know that they do have the world champion Emi Martinez in goal, and he does try to dictate to his back four. But sometimes, when it comes to the likes of Pau Torres and Diego Carlos, positionally, sometimes they may not be the best. And whenever you have a situation where Luca Digne may be injured and Alex Moreno can't be selected, they may also have crises of their own. They've had Ezri Konsa playing at right back, despite the fact that he's a much better centre back than right back whenever Matty Cash has been suspended. Or injured or whatever. So they've had to deal with makeshift defences. Even Liverpool have been forced to play Joe Gomez at left back due to injuries to Andy Robertson and Shimikas. I think your friend on that podcast must have told you that. Gomez, in fact, is a deceptively good right back, but due to the presence of one Trent Alexander-Arnold, he may never get to play often at right back, or certainly have a run. So he's now been asked to deputise at left back on occasions, and with Trent picking up an injury, Klopp has had to bring Connor Bradley in. So either one of those two would have to play at right or left back. They could switch. I think Bradley's been used on the right and Gomez on the left. So having a makeshift defence is definitely not fun. And you have these teams who have somehow found a way to try and make do with what they possibly have. Liverpool, of course, are still still top of the league. Aston Villa are flying quite high under Unai Emery. So Iraola is just going to have to try and find a way, and it will very much be a makeshift defence. And let's not get any ideas that even without Mohamed Salah, Liverpool will necessarily be weak. Because
Mhm.
although Darwin Núñez has been inconsistent, Liverpool can always call on the likes of Luis Diaz and Cody Gakpo to strengthen the front line immensely. Their midfield is still quite strong. They've got Ali Mack, Alexis McAllister very much back running the show. Szoboszlai, I don't know if he's injured, but if he isn't injured and fit, then that could be a bit of a problem. So having a makeshift defence, all I can say, is definitely not fun. And, you know, I don't even know what the situation is with your injuries. I mean, you did say that Max Aarons is out, and you don't have Kirkies or
Yeah.
Kelly, and Mepham coming back may not necessarily be the best idea.
Mm,
Of course, let's also cut Mepham a bit of slack. It's never going to be
yeah.
easy coming back into the team after a long layoff, so it could very well be that Iraola may have to stick and twist with him in the team. It might very well be that you're just going to have to pick the best back four or back five and see what you can do. One thing which I can say, though, is that if you do go in with a back five, you could perhaps have a few issues. In fact, I want to take a look at the reverse fixture that was played earlier when, you lot lost 3-1
Yeah.
at Anfield. I do seem to remember Neto saving a Salah penalty only to concede the rebound.
Mhm.
And I just want to take a look at the. Yeah, that was also a game where Ali Mack saw red. But
Yes.
the Liverpool still went on to win, and Jota, in fact, scored the winning goal after 62 minutes. But Semenyo did actually score for you as early as the 3rd minute. And if we take a look at the formation that was applied, well, it was a 4-2-3-1, and Senesi was there, Kirkis was at left back, Aarons and Sabani were in the defence. I just don't seem to know if playing a back five would be the best way to go, though, because could it it's bad enough that you may have to field a makeshift defense. I don't even know if you have enough defenders to create a back five. And you had Ryan Christie and Jake Rothwell as the defensive midfielders,
Yeah.
and Brooks came on as a substitute. There's a part of me that thinks that maybe was there a game where you played Billing as a defender? I seem to remember him playing in the back some time ago.
Um, we played Watara in defence, of course. That was against Spurs. I'm trying to think actually, because earlier on in the season, I think we were. I'm trying to think which game. Yeah, I don't think you're wrong with that, but I think with regards to where we are at the moment, and the defense has been solid, for a number of weeks. Yeah, we conceded 3 at Spurs, but the defensive performance against Fulham was excellent. We conceded 2 against Forest, but before that, the Crystal Palace game, where I don't think really we got out, got into our full flow, but it was such a good performance. And of course, who can forget the Man United win? So, our defense has been solid, but I just worry now that, this with Kirkes being injured, you've got Senesi now out suspended. I think that it's going to be a game which is going to be tough because it just doesn't feel, it feels like we've got, when everybody's fit, a solid back line that is dependable. They know what they can have to do. They know Iriola's style. I've always said, the best teams defend well, and you know, I know it's only a computer game, but Football Manager, for example, it's normally quite accurate, but I've started doing that, taking that up, and my priority on there is to defend well, because if you score one up the other end, 1-0 wins. But coming back to real life, I think defensively we've been solid. We've been solid, and now I just worry because Mepham wasn't brilliant in that game against QPR. Um, he's probably a little bit rusty. There is transfer speculation over his head at the moment as well. Um, there's quite a few concerns, going into this game, even though we'll come on to, Liverpool and of course, how many players they've got at African Cup of Nations and, out injured themselves, because I think we can hurt them, but there is concerns.
There are. And looking at the formation that you played, it was good enough to actually take advantage of Liverpool's weakness at the back and score very early on. And bear in mind that I know that Virgil van Dijk might have returned from injury and he could be expected to partner Ibrahim Konate in the centre of the defence. Certainly no place for Kwanzaa, who was given a bit of a rough time by Arsenal in the FA Cup, although he eventually settled down and started to perform better. But obviously their weakness on the flanks could very well be exploited. So your best hope would be to go in with that 4-2-3-1 formation and just pick whoever really is fit, and also hope that you can try and choke the midfield without allowing them to go in. Because I know that they're going to play that 4-3-3 formation, obviously. And if they don't have Salah, then it's going to be Diaz, Nunez, and Gakpo up front. It will be McAllister, it will be Szoboszlai, it will be Curtis Jones, maybe Ryan Gravenberch could come on as a substitute, and some other substitutes can also come on and slow the game down. But if you allow the midfield to dominate, then you could be in for a tough battle, because at least if you have two defensive midfielders and three attacking midfielders, you should, at least in theory, be able to try and get the better of them. I do seem to remember whenever we played our best football, it was with that 4-2-3-1 formation. But since going to the 4-3-3, I mean, we've looked good against Liverpool in patches, but when it mattered, we were found wanting. And we were quite lucky at Anfield in the league. We deservedly lost to them in the FA Cup. Yes, we won the first half, but then there's always a second half to be played. We allowed ourselves to switch off defensively, and they took advantage of it. So you can't allow yourself to switch off defensively at any time. And all I can say is, with regards to the defense, just stick a makeshift back four in and hope and pray. If you go to five at the back, you're asking for trouble.
Of course, Mo Salah won't be playing. He's playing for Egypt in the African Cup of Nations.
Exactly.
And they do have a lot of injuries, Liverpool. So I'm optimistic, despite this defence, despite it being a bit makeshift, I'm optimistic, if the players, stay in the same groove, of course, Dominic Solanke as well, has got something to prove, and we'll come on to players that could be leaving in a moment because we need to talk about, Solanke and, what could happen with him. But I think, with the players going forwards, I think, we've got enough to hurt Liverpool. And, considering how well we've been doing recently.
You do. The only problem is Klopp is also going to be determined to try and make sure that the team don't concede too easily, and they've also got the little matter of protecting their lead at the top of the table. And I think with Manchester City, of course, winning, not convincingly, mind you, but barely by the skin of their teeth at St. James's Park, and the return of a certain Kevin De Bruyne to their team, they're going to start a run. I just wonder, though, if the stutter that they've had at the very beginning, or thereabouts, has cost them a little bit. We all remember how they lost to your former boss, Gary O'Neill, who drilled his Wolves side very well indeed. And they gave us we were comfortable for the most part against them at the Emirates, but then we allowed them to come back into the game, and they could have potentially snatched a draw. That was, of course, Wolves. So all I can say is that be prepared to face a Liverpool team that will be determined to prove more than a few people wrong. Because don't forget, it's not just Salah, it's Endo who's at the Asian Cup. And
Yeah.
Endo has certainly looked a lot better than when he first got into the team. Against Crystal Palace at Selhurst Park, he looked like a duck out of water, but then he has started to improve his performances and really grow into his role. I wouldn't necessarily say that he'd be a miss, but more than that front line is the midfield that you're going to have to worry about, because if the midfield gets some traction going and they provide service to the front three, better watch out.
Yeah, definitely. It's quite interesting. Endo was a player that a lot of Liverpool fans moaned about, but I think he's a shrewd bit of business. And I think sensible from Klopp. Klopp knows what he wants, and Klopp, has got a team that has been firing on all cylinders this year. And that's where my next question is going to really go, because I had the pleasure of going on the Anfield Talk podcast. Great group of lads, and one thing that I did ask them is that there's going to become a point that Liverpool got all these injuries. There's going to become a point where, focusing on 4 competitions, they should get. Let's be fair; they'll get to the Carabao Cup final. The FA Cup, they could come up against somebody tough. Still a long way to go. You've got the Europa League. Again, still a lot of football to be played in that, and of course their bread and butter, which is the Premier League. The question to them is, I don't think Liverpool have got the depth that a side like Manchester City have got, and Liverpool fans will be expecting a trophy. They will get, a trophy of some sort, I'm sure, this season. But on the spin side of that, the fixture congestion later on in the season, considering they've got so many injuries at the moment, where are they going to need to start thinking, right, okay, we need to rotate and rest players here to make sure that we're, how do they target? So I don't think they can target 4 trophies, in one season. I don't think it's, we've had the treble with Manchester City, but Manchester City have spent a ridiculous amount of money. The Manchester United team in 1999, who won the treble, it was a coming together and fantastic work by Alex Ferguson, at that point. I just don't think that. I think that they're going to come to a point where it's going to be very, very difficult for them to target, as much as they can. There'll be that fixture pile up, and it's going to come to a point where they think, right, okay, we need to focus on the Premier League, or rest players for the Premier League and focus on the Europa League. I'm sure the Premier League is their priority.
Let's not forget, Craig, that Liverpool actually did make an attempt at doing the quadruple not too long ago.
Yeah.
It was a season, I don't quite remember the season, where they won the FA Cup, they won the League Cup, and if memory serves me right, they lost the Champions League final to Real Madrid and ended up being pipped to the league title by Manchester City. And I think at that time, you could possibly say that the squad they had then was at least marginally better than what they have now. Of course, at that time, they still had Jordan Henderson and Jimmy Milner and Bobby Firmino and a few other people there. And this time around, it's a makeshift I wouldn't say a makeshift midfield, but definitely a new midfield. And it is going to be a makeshift defense. What Klopp has been able to do is identify several youngsters in the Liverpool academy and give them a few chances to play. And what he did against against Arsenal, mind you, was that he threw on the likes of Conor Bradley and others to get a good 15-minute run out. And they actually had a pretty decent time of it.
Yeah.
Now, bear in mind, of course, that having beaten Arsenal, they will be facing I think it was the win of the Bristol Rovers Norwich City game. Norwich City won that, so Norwich City
Yeah.
will be facing them in the next round. And of course, having beaten Arsenal, they will face Norwich City and maybe have a good time of it. And then, of course, the remainder of the draw will come in. There is a part of me that thinks that Klopp will probably give his youngsters the chance to play the cup games, especially the League Cup games. Maybe not the FA Cup so much if it's against a bigger team, but then
Hmm.
he's going to look to try to bring some more youngsters in, and he's doing really well. He'll be able to do quite well what Mikel Arteta hasn't done. And bear in mind, of course, a certain Harvey Elliott had the record of being the youngest ever Premier League player when he was at Fulham. That record, of course, was broken by Arsenal and Ethan Nwaneri when Arteta chose to bring him on. I believe that was at I think that was last season he brought him on against Fulham. I don't quite. Yeah, it was actually against Fulham at the Emirates, a game which we won 2-1. And since then, Nwaneri hasn't played a single Premiership game. And there are several of us who think, why would Arteta want to do something like that, if not just to gain the publicity and the recognition of having fielded the youngest ever Premier League player, and then hardly ever give him a game. And of course, Elliott obviously didn't play very much that season, but the following season he did well for Fulham. And then, of course, Liverpool were interested in him and they brought him in, and the rest is history. Look at what Elliott's
Yeah.
done. So Klopp has actually got his finger on the pulse when it comes to getting some youngsters in, and that's what he might choose to do. And let's bear in mind that I think during the period of the AFCON and the Asian Cup, which are going on, I think Liverpool's games, which they've got right now, should be fairly manageable games. In fact, I want to take a look at the run-in that they've got. And of course, and we all know the breaking news that their former skipper, Jordan Henderson, has in fact left his Saudi Arabian club and gone to join Ajax Amsterdam. Never should have joined Saudi Arabia in the first place. Yes, he wanted to leave Liverpool. Yeah.
I was going to ask you that very, very question because it seems like everybody's jumped up, in in the summer and gone Saudi Arabia. That's where we want to be. They're playing. You've got Ronaldo over there. Ruben Neves has gone over there. Jordan Henderson. Who else? Has gone over there. And the problem is with the Saudi Arabian League, I can see what they're trying to do, and it's fair enough. Fair play to them. However, there is a couple of things with this. Is a I've been over, as you know, back in August to the UAE. Now the UAE is right next to Saudi Arabia, and the heat over there was 41 degrees. Now, I'm not saying that, it's 41 degrees over there at the moment. It's not. But still, it's a lot hotter than most places. And if you're playing in a small stadium in Saudi Arabia and you're from a European club, say, for example, an Englishman going over to Saudi Arabia, it's going to be a struggle because we are used to snowy weather. We're not used to blistering heat. If you asked me and gave me a ball, Manny, and said, "There you are, Craig. In Abu Dhabi, play 90 minutes of football," I'd probably have given up after 5. To be honest, it was that hot. Um, so that's one of the problems. But the second problem is you've got all these great players, Ronaldo, you got Neves, you got Jordan Henderson all over there. Now they are individuals, and if anybody's seen the David Beckham documentary, this really highlights why Saudi Arabia isn't the right place for footballers at the moment. Is because the quality of the opposition that they're coming up against, they could be they're playing, of course, against each other, but at the same time they're playing against players that aren't of that level. I'm not saying Saudi Arabian football's rubbish. I'm not saying that at all. And I'm not saying the Saudi Arabian footballers are rubbish. What I'm saying though is, as a footballing country, they've still got a long way to go. And hopefully, if any Saudi Arabians are watching this, you know, they, will understand my reason that football in Saudi Arabia has still got a long, long way to go, and you can't go click your fingers, bring in all these players, and have one of the best leagues in the world overnight, regardless of how much money you spend. If you spend £5.99 or 599 billion
Exactly.
trillion, that's where English football has adapted over a period of time. The Premier League, going back to when it was founded, you know, of course, we already had, a top level division. I remember, the shows on Channel 4 showing Italian football, and you used to love the likes of Sampdoria and Fiorentina and you name it. But it was over time. It was over time that our league become as it was. A bit like, over time, I think the Italian league has kind of digressed a bit. And Saudi Arabian football might need to develop. It's not saying it will never get there. It needs to develop over a period of 10 years, for example.
Absolutely, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. And I will get to your question, get to this question before going back to Liverpool's run-in. And I will say that obviously, with Saudi Arabia securing that shock result against Argentina in the World Cup,
Hmm.
which I did say would spur Argentina on to victory, and I did call
You
it.
did,
Never,
yes.
I'm never going to be tired of saying that. I don't. I know it's a case of blowing my trumpet, and people might be sick to death of me saying that, but I won't get tired of that. And that result really put them into the spotlight, and
Mhm.
obviously at that sort of about that time, they saw this as an opportunity to try to promote that league and offer, the ridiculous sums of money they're offering. I think it's fair to say that, there's still a long way to go. But this Saudi team, though, which beat Argentina, is a far cry from the team of 1994, which earned 2 wins in the group stage and qualified for the second round proper in '94. And some of those players, mind you, this current squad, quite frankly, couldn't hold a candle to them. And had the
Mhm.
Super League been in and around that time, you could have seen those players really develop themselves and become real legends of the game. But of course, Saudi Arabia also used to host the Confederations Cup on several occasions.
Yeah.
And so there is a history with Saudi Arabia. I think now they're trying to, really cash in on it a great deal more. But you're absolutely right. Some of the players, the local players, for example, just aren't really of the level as of yet. You do have a few former internationals who are playing, but I think their best days are behind them. And so you see the gap in quality between those stars who are at the stratosphere and the local players. And this is no disrespect to them at all. You've got to find some sort of a middle ground. And this would have been a perfect league for, other, veteran players who wanted to have a kind of a payday to come and, play. But when you try and get some of these big names who are and sort of try and attract them with big fees, you just don't know how ambitious they are. And for Henderson to have taken the money and gone like that, I think obviously he's getting a lot of backlash, for that, and rightly so. I mean, rightly or maybe not. Um, you know, given his status as an LGBTQIA ally in the UK, I think a lot of people were entitled to take a look at his move to Saudi Arabia as a bit of a betrayal. And even not even he can deny that that it was about the money, because he should have known that in a very culturally religiously strict country like Saudi Arabia, there's no way that you can get away with any alternative lifestyles as such. But
Mhm.
I mean, he went there for the money, and for some reason he couldn't settle. He decided that he couldn't hack it, and if he was serious about about being in contention to play for England in the Euros, he never should have taken the deal. He
Mm.
could have done what James Milner did and tried to look for another English club, maybe follow Milner and Adam Lallana to Brighton and play, or maybe find some other club who would have been interested in him, or even another club in Europe, perhaps, and maybe things would have been better. But it is what it is, and your concerns about the Saudi league are absolutely correct. There is a long way to go before the league can be of good quality. In fact, I believe Southgate made it crystal clear to Henderson that with the standard of football in Saudi Arabia not necessarily being of the highest, to play there and expect to be considered for England again and again and again wouldn't be fair. I mean, I know that Calvin Phillips is pretty much his own worst enemy now. Henderson's continue to play for England and do pretty well, but there's no way that he will be able to continue, and I don't know if he'll be able to earn his 100th cap for the country, but we'll take a look and see. And just going back to Liverpool now, I want to take a look at their running because obviously after the Bournemouth game on Sunday, they've got the second leg of the League Cup semi-final.
Yep.
They've got the fourth round of the FA Cup against Norwich City. So that's another extended Premiership break for a lot of teams. They return to the Premier League, playing Chelsea at Anfield, a game which they're expected to win. And of course, they go into the Emirates on the 4th of February to play my lot, Arsenal, potentially without Salah and Trent Alexander-Arnold. But then Liverpool came to the Emirates and played us without Mohamed Salah, and they still beat us. And then, of course, Burnley, Brentford, Luton. So listen, these are, with the exception of the Arsenal game, these are games right now where the absences of Endo and Salah might not necessarily affect them, and it will be a chance for other players to step up and play. In as much as Darwin Núñez, as your Liverpool friends will tell you, is maddeningly inconsistent, he does have a happy knack of being able to score goals when the team needs them. The only problem is this season he's not really been able to score too many, but I think the game which comes to my mind is against Eddie Howe's Newcastle at St James's Park, where I believe, if memory serves me right, Liverpool had a man sent off and were 1-0 down, but then Núñez came on and took those 3 points away and left the Geordies in tears. So this is going to be an opportunity, obviously, for the other players in the squad to stand up and make themselves counted. And one thing which I will credit Jurgen Klopp for is that he is a master motivator. Because if he can get a Salah-less Liverpool and also a Liverpool that didn't have Ibrahim Konate playing to beat us at the Emirates, there's no reason why he can't do well against Bournemouth at Dean Court. But of course, I will be hoping, for obvious reasons, that the Cherries can, cause an upset, because we need to see an open race, because Arsenal will depend on it, Aston Villa will depend on it. We've got Crystal Palace coming up this weekend on a Saturday, and anything less than a win, and our title ambitions are out. And to think, Craig, that you were predicting that Arsenal would win it all this season.
Wow, I to be honest, I thought you would at the start of the season.
Yeah.
I think it went off the boil, end of last year, and I think again, it's when push comes to shove, and things do get, difficult at the end of a season. When there's a lot more on the line, sides do falter. Now, the advantage Manchester City have got is they've got a huge squad. Of course, they've got those 115 charges. We'll come on to that as well, because I think that's a really good discussion point, is Manchester City and what happens with them. But, I think they have got that staying power. They have got that staying power because they've got such a large squad. Whereas, sometimes I think when it gets tough at the end of the season, the likes of Liverpool with lots of injuries, and Arsenal with lots of injuries, players losing form, players being fatigued, it can take a lot out of them. But I tell you what, let's bring it on to Cherries that could be leaving the club, because Bill Foley famously said that there wasn't going to be any, there's not going to be many players out during this transfer window. He hinted one, and we knew who that player was. That was Lloyd Kelly. Lloyd is still with the squad. Of course, he is injured. It's not. I wouldn't be surprised if he still left the club. But with the problems in defence, I think we could potentially see some coming in. So let's go through each one. The first one, of course, is Lloyd Kelly. Could you see him leaving? His contract's out at the end of the season. You know, it seems like it's hit a bit of a stalemate. Hopefully, fingers crossed, it will pick up and Lloyd will stay, because I do like Lloyd, as much as maybe maybe he has made mistakes. He has made mistakes. I think he, is a good defender. Newcastle and Spurs wouldn't be after him if he wasn't, would they?
Not really, no. And this is probably where the management, which includes Iriola and company, are going to have to sit down with him and have a bit of a chat on basically about his future with the team and where he sees himself, because he is a more than decent defender, but there have always been some doubts about his future with the club and whether or not he will be in the long-term plans of Iriola and company. And obviously, the longer Iriola stays, the more he's going to want to try to, refresh the team, evolve the team more in his image. And it's sad, really, because Kelly has been a pretty good servant. He was, of course, captain of the club for quite some time before relinquishing that to Neto. And it would be a bit of a shame to lose a servant like him, but he's going to have to sort of be honest with himself and see if he really feels up to the challenge of staying at Bournemouth a little bit longer. I wonder if I will say fair play to him. He's been certainly very professional since losing the captaincy and continued to do whatever he could to offer himself to the team and contribute in a more positive manner. But if the injuries are taking their toll, and if he feels as though he might end up being phased out eventually, then maybe this could be the time to cash in on him. And it's sad, really, because in an ideal world, you would like him to stay. But given his age, I'm not sure that he would end up signing another multi-year deal if it meant staying at the club. And if anything, actually, you know what? He's only 25 years old, so he could sign a multi-year deal.
Well, see, the thing is with Lloyd Kelly, personally, I think it's either he signs a deal because, of course, he's out of contract. I think if we might be thinking of Adam Smith here, because Adam Smithy signed a new extension. But with Lloyd Kelly, I think if he extends his contract, during this window, we need that'd be brilliant. I'm all for that. But if he's not going to extend, if there's no possibility of him staying at AFC Bournemouth after the season because he is out of contract, I would cash in.
Really?
I would cash in during this window, because you don't want to lose him for nothing. You don't want to lose him for nothing. Every player's got a value. FFP, of course, and we'll come on to that, because actually it's a really good, interesting point that I want to pick your brains over. But I would cash in on Lloyd Kelly. But we've already seen one player leave the club. And okay, it sounds like it's on loan, and there's other players as well that are mentioned on loan. But Joe Rothwell, and I think Joe Rothwell is a good midfielder. He's not. He's not the sort of player where you'll say, okay, he's the like Justin Kluivert, does things spectacular. He does the basics well. He's a good passer of the ball. He can get the ball out to the wings, and he's dependable. He's not the fastest player in the world, but he is dependable. And he's gone to Southampton, and that was a bit of a shocking one for me, because I thought that in certain situations he's the right fit.
Exactly. I mean, he's made 11 appearances this current campaign, in fact, if you take a look at his stats. And 2 in the League Cup. Obviously, Bournemouth are no longer there. So why Iriola would see it fit to send him out on loan, I don't know. I mean, does he see a different shape of midfield? Does he finally want to give David Brooks more of a chance to come back into the team and express himself? that was really, I have to say, a bit of a shock to me, and I'm not too sure why that would happen. Hopefully, maybe this is a sign. Maybe in some ways, Iriola still sees Rothwell as a part of his plans and will have him back the next season.
Hmm.
But it really was surprising to see him leave, because he was certainly, in some ways, starting to become a more important player. Maybe it's a sign, though, that with the likes of Alex Scott recovering well and coming back into the team, and of course Tyler Adams also set to return, the likes of Kluivert and company also doing really well. Tavernier is still there and still playing and still doing very well. I thought that he
Yeah.
would leave, but he's still very much there. And, Rothwell should be coming back, but if you do decide to cash in on Kelly, that would be one thing. But also bear in mind, Craig, that if you want to cash in on Kelly, you aren't going to have to sign another defender, because the crisis
Agree.
that you've got means that, I get wanting to sell before you can buy, especially
Mm.
if I don't know, I don't really know how much in terms of money Foley will be offering Iriola this January to try and spend on players if need be. But you might need to get a defender. So if you do decide to cash in on Kelly, you're going to have to get a replacement. It could very well be that Kelly might end up signing a 1-year extension the closer we get to the end of the season, and then might end up staying for a little bit, and then you can possibly try and sell him, because in the summer you can then look to further extend the squad. So I know you'd like to cash in on him. I'm thinking maybe he'll leave at the end of the season. But then if he does get to sign a contract extension, that might actually be the better thing for both parties. And maybe Kelly will feel as though he might have something to prove in a way.
Wow. You did mention David Brooks there, and that's quite an interesting one, because David Brooks has also been linked. Now, this is, and I was speaking to Matt about this the other day, and we had quite a detailed conversation about David Brooks, because he is wanted by both Southampton and Leeds, and it sounds as if David Brooks is going to be allowed to go on loan. Now, everybody knows I really rate David Brooks. Everybody knows that. Everybody knows that I wanted him to get a lot more time than he has. But my question, my thought is, of course, he didn't play very much last season. He's had Hodgkin lymphoma. He's recovered from that, thankfully. He's got the all clear. But has he recovered? To the level that Iriola wants him to? Because in reserve games and friendly games, he's looked outstanding. He's looked a good player. But do you think that Iriola is thinking, right, okay, give him a loan, to get this fitness back to peak performance? Or, it'd be crying shame if David Brooks's time is, going to be limited here. I'd be quite disappointed and quite sad about that, to be honest.
Oh, me too, mate. Me too. If I were a Bournemouth fan, especially given the sentimental nature of his return to the team, the quality he has, and how much it meant to the fans and to him, I wouldn't want to see him leave either. But football can be a bit of a ruthless business sometimes,
Mhm.
and I do see the merit in sending him on loan, but there's also a part of me that feels that he does have a lot more to offer Bournemouth. And if Bournemouth were to suffer some more injuries in midfield, could they afford to lose any more? I mean, sending Joe Rothwell away just down the road to Southampton was a huge shock to my system personally, because I never thought that Rothwell would have been considered, not necessarily surplus to requirements, but maybe Iriola didn't really consider him, to be fitting into that system. And I think that's a bit of a shame. Maybe Rothwell did play quite a few games, but then that was during a period where Bournemouth weren't doing too well. And maybe Iriola wants the likes of Brooks and Rothwell to sharpen themselves up a bit away from the goldfish bowl that is Dean Court. But it's a risky strategy because, again, injuries are gonna play a part. They will take their toll, and you just have to assume that someone else will end up falling down. It could be Lewis Cook, it could be Ryan Christie, it could be someone else.
Mhm.
Don't forget, Christie is very much an international for Scotland, very much involved with the team,
Yeah.
and it's a bit of a risky strategy. And both of these guys, Craig, are in their mid-20s. So you would
Mm.
think, in theory, that they could. These are the types of players who could sign multi-year deals at any club, and nobody would bat an eyelid.
Yeah.
And the fact that there's so much doubt about their futures here, I think it's sad, really, to see the situation the way it is, and how, in Kelly's case, he might have perhaps declined a little bit and is trying to push himself back up. And in Brooks's case, obviously being out for a long time, but beating cancer inspirationally and
Mm.
then coming back, doing as well as he can, but maybe it isn't quite good enough. There is a part of me that hopes that both Rothwell and Brooks will stay at the club, and Kelly also will, find a way to stay and maybe get back to some semblance of the form that he showed. But in a way, it shows how ruthless Iriola is in a way. And one thing I can tell you about some of these Spanish managers, they're going to try their best to help players around, but they're
Yeah.
also going to be professional enough to try and say, you know what, I've got to put the club first. And it's going to be difficult to try and tell a certain player, son, you're not going to be a part of my plans going forward. But that's a decision that Iriola's making. And maybe now he feels that with the club heading upwards on a trajectory, this could be a time to, really start thinking about all of these things. Ideally, he'd wait until the end of the season, but maybe he wants to try to do it now and see if he can improve the team now and make sure that they can
Mm.
possibly rise a little bit higher. We don't quite know. We'll have to see.
Talking about risky strategies, and we'll come back to players that might be leaving the club. But personally, this could be a risky strategy. Now, there's not been much about, how much this player would cost. There's not much about how much this player will be on. What we do know about him is he's a midfielder, so it might be a case that he would come in, and would he start? You might think he possibly could do. He could go on loan, and what has been rumoured that he might go on loan to Hibs. Of course, a team that Bill Foley is looking at, and of course, Lorient. Like I had the guest Nicholas on a couple of weeks back. Lorient are in dire trouble. It might be a loan that would benefit them, but 19 years old midfielder. Um, Oscar Zambrano, Ecuadorian midfielder. It looks like Bournemouth have basically got this wonder kid from under Manchester United's nose.
Wow.
Yeah, but like I say, it's a risky strategy because you bring in a player like that. Now, it's not necessarily he'll go out on loan because we're already loaning out midfielders. If he comes into the squad, he's either got to be really, really, really good, or Iriola's just taking a huge risk.
Just taking a look at Zambrano's stats right now.
Mm,
5'9", 1.76 meters, midfielder. Sort of medium height, as it were, average height. Um, Played about, he was in the LDU Quito youth team for several
yeah.
years before breaking into the first team. And this would be a risk, definitely, because 19 years old. Um,
Is it a Brighton type risk though? Because let's be honest, Brighton have benefited from doing this sort of thing. But really, how good? Really, how good is the Ecuadorian league? At this point in time, can we effectively let a player like Joe Rothwell, go out on loan, or maybe even sell him in the summer? and bring in this youngster who's never played in the Premier League, has played in again. I'm all about, and everybody will know this. I'm all about players coming in who've played a decent standard of football. If you've played in, the San Marino National League and you think you're going to walk into the Premier League, that's not going to happen actually. But if if that was to happen, I don't think it should, because you have to build yourself up to play at the top flight of English football. And there's certain leagues that, it can happen from. It can happen from the Championship to the Premier League. Fine. Players do that all the time. Through promotion. You know, it's Italy, Germany, Spain, France, all the ones that you expect. But again, this is a huge risk because it might not come off.
It might not. It might not. And this particular guy, though, interestingly enough, has actually been called up to the senior Ecuadorian team,
Yeah.
and he was actually in the squad for two World Cup qualification games against Venezuela and Chile. Although I don't think he made an appearance or got off the field. I'll have to check the match results and tell you in a way. But you know, it's a type of strategy that could either really work well or could fall flat. And for a 19-year-old, maybe there's a sense in that, taking a punt on him and asking him to come into the team and try and play. He would at least be guaranteed some more playing time at Bournemouth than he would at Manchester City, because we all know that City will
Oh, it's
sign him.
United that are after him.
Yeah,
Man United.
United.
Yeah.
Yeah, United possibly could have signed him, but there isn't a
Mm,
guarantee that they would have, thrown him into the team. I know that they've got some problems with the aging nature of their midfield. Casemiro and Christian Eriksen are not exactly spring chickens, and even
no.
Bruno Fernandes is also starting to get on just a little bit, you could say. But if this guy Zambrano would have been purchased by United, I don't think he would have seen first team action immediately. I
No.
think the prospect of playing maybe a few games at Bournemouth might tempt him. Maybe it's an example in a way, Craig, of Iriola wanting to start to stamp his mark and try and really, mold the team a little bit, sort of help the team evolve and bring more flair into the team as a part of the way he wants to play. And it started to work really well. And so when you lot travel to Molineux to face your old manager again, I think revenge will be on the order. It will be very interesting to see how well you do against his 3-4-3 formation. But
Yeah.
hypothetically, if Zambrano were to be signed in the January window and he were to play a few games with the option to possibly either continue it or maybe loan him for a season or maybe move him on, I don't know. I guess it's a case of saying, what do you really have to lose? I mean, I'm not going to tempt fate. I don't see Bournemouth getting relegated, but it's a way of freshening things up. And one thing which I would like to see, though, is Iriola using this energy to try and rejig the defence, because you mentioned there's going to be a makeshift defence with injuries to Kirkies and Lloyd Kelly. The prospect of having someone like a Dongo Otara at left back does not make you very happy. I mean, look, we've suffered enough with Alexander Zinchenko, Jakub Kivior, and these guys, neither of them can cut the mustard in that
Mhm.
position. So I think Iriola needs to get a defender, and Zambrano is really one of those purchases which is not only a bit of a risk, which could work. It's also one of those purchases, perhaps, which makes you think, now of all times.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. I guess it depends how much he comes for, but I think we need players, and I completely agree with you. Defender, and we'll talk about another player in a moment. A defender is paramount, because Chris Mepham is being linked with Sheffield United now. This is a deal that I think I wouldn't be against. I wouldn't be against, because I don't think Chris Mepham is up to the level task. But again, like you've just said, Manny, And like I've been saying to all the Bournemouth fans recently, we need defenders in there before we do this, because letting Chris Mepham go is, well, who's to say that we're not going to get injuries, in that defence? We've already got a depleted defence, so we need to get some more strength and more depth in that defence before we let Mepham go. But if we do, out of the two, I'd rather keep Kelly and let Mepham go.
I'd agree with you. And it is, of course, difficult because, Mepham is also in his mid-20s. He's also the third captain.
Yeah.
Already played 102 league two appearances. He's already played 102 times in the league for Bournemouth. And the sad part is that as a full Welsh international, you'd think there'd be a little bit more in terms of quality about him. But I think taking a look right now, maybe some of the injuries that he sustained. I think he had a knee injury in as long back as 2020, 3 years ago, more than 3 years ago. In fact, in January 2020. I don't know if he's necessarily the same, and it could very well be, mind you, that if he's not going to get any game time under Iraola, then he will obviously want to try to look to gain some game time, especially with Wales still harbouring ambitions of qualifying for the European Championships themselves. They weren't able to qualify from their group stage, but due to some permutations, they still have some chance of making it, even if it means having to go through a great deal of other loopholes or whatever, playoffs and so forth.
Yeah.
But Mepham might want some game time. So I would say that if Iraola, and a lot of you think that he is not of the level that you need and he isn't going to be good enough going forward, then you will need to move as quickly as possible to cash in on him. And also, as you agree, get one or two defenders on the books to help shape up the squad. And if you choose Kelly over Mepham, maybe Kelly would be the one to keep. It's going to be sad for Mepham because he would have. Obviously, Mepham is a big part of the leadership group now, currently, but there is no room for sentiment in football, and you sometimes have to consider what might be the best decision to make for the club in that respect. And that is where Iraola can be ruthless. So all of these players you've mentioned so far will certainly get to have some discussions with the boss. And they will obviously, have a good talking to about their futures at the club. And there will be a resolution for them. I would say that, just briefly, I do apologize, mate. I would say very briefly that you cannot afford to lose too many players in certain positions if you don't have enough players to back them up. And so that is why you've got to tread very carefully when it comes to letting players go in certain positions. Losing Rothwell is one thing. To lose Brooks might be another. It could leave the midfield a little bit more weakened. And if you already have a weakened defence, can you afford to let both Kelly and Mepham leave? It's sad, really, because I think Mepham in some cases has been a good performer for Bournemouth. Maybe not to Kelly's level per se. Maybe Mepham hasn't really been able to rise to another level as such, but he could do a job. And yet, having said that, sometimes managers have to be a little bit ruthless. I'm just surprised, in a way, that Iraola might choose to be ruthless now, but. You're going to have to think about this. And Mepham might maybe decide that a change would do him good. He might also want to leave. A loan deal with an option to buy would be not too bad, maybe. But, how long does Mepham have left on his contract, by the way?
He's got plenty of time. But I think it's a case that I just don't think he's up to the level. I don't think he's up to the level. Sheffield United, of course, is the club that are after him, and hand on heart, I would let him go.
This is a good time to cash in on him when he's got years left on his contract,
Mhm.
and at least he can be sold for some dosh, which can come back to you in a way.
Well, there's one player that we don't want leaving, and Bill Foley made it quite clear, and I think this might have been why he come out and said he's not going. We're not selling. We're keeping all the doors shut. Dominic Solanke. Now, hand on heart, does Dominic Solanke want to go to Arsenal or Chelsea or Man City or I think he probably will do, but he's a professional. He's a good lad, and he will continue doing. He's not going to mope about this, but I think we need to. The door is bolted shut. I think 60 million is not enough. I think for what he does, dropping back, creating so much more, Clive at Billing, bringing them into it. Um, Secondly, we haven't got the strength. If somebody said, "Oh yeah," and I saw the comment, and they said, this young striker looks really really good. And my thing is, yeah, it's all well and good again buying a young striker, but you need somebody who is proven. You can't throw, a 19, 20-year-old up front, you know, in the Premier League. You need somebody who's proven. You can have them as a backup card, and I don't mind having Solanke more, and then this young striker who comes on and proves himself, like Eddie Howe had, where he had Dominic Solanke as the young striker and had Callum Wilson and Josh King up there, and the same with Lise Mousse when he was at the club. But personally, I think that would be a risk. Well, I think it would be footballing suicide really to actually replace a player like Solanke with a youngster. Um, and what we really need is an extra striker. Bring him in. As a third, as a third cog. Keep him more target man. Get the balls in. I'm not for him leaving the club. Some others will be because he's not fast. But he offers something different when you're chasing a game. Dominic Solanke drops back, creates things. Semenyo can do that sort of football as well. And then a youngster, fair enough. That would be fine. Have a youngster in there, but Dominic Solanke has to stay. During this January window. Would you agree? And the only time, if Dominic Solanke wants to leave in the summer, I would let him go when you've got enough time to actually find somebody to replace him, because you might get 60 million or 80 million from Arsenal, Manchester United, Liverpool, you name it, whoever. Um, but then you've got to spend a fair size chunk of that on finding the proper replacement, because a youngster for £1 million who's never played a game of Premier League football is not the answer in this division.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. And it's really funny that about Solanke, I wouldn't say fun, not really the right word to say. This guy was on the books at Chelsea and Liverpool
Mm,
before coming to Bournemouth. Never made a single league appearance at Chelsea. Played 21 times in the Premiership for Liverpool across 2 seasons and left the club before they went on to win the Champions League in 29. I think 2020 was when they won it. I'm not too sure.
yeah, I think I'm trying to think. I'm trying to think back now. But yeah, it wasn't that long ago, was it? It was
No, it wasn't. It wasn't. It wasn't. And I tell you,
2019, I think.
no, it was 2019. So
Yeah.
yeah, the thing is though, he didn't make a single appearance for Liverpool at all, and I think I don't know if he was injured and simply not available, maybe, or whatever the case may be.
Mhm.
He never played in that season, and he missed out on being on being a Champions League winner and then ended up coming to Bournemouth. Maybe he feels as though his mind might be thinking two things. I don't know which one of them, but this one thing might be: I've had stints at Liverpool, Chelsea, and Liverpool. Never really made my mark. I don't want to be in a situation where I go to another big club and more is expected of me and things don't go too well. I'm happy here at Bournemouth and I want to stay and I'm not leaving. Or another thing could very well be maybe it didn't work at Chelsea or Liverpool, but maybe if I don't take a chance to join a big club, I might regret it at this particular time. This bloke, who was also born in Reading, and I know that there's a wonderful Reading connection with you, Craig, has also been capped by England, although he made a substitute appearance in the 75th minute in a friendly against Brazil at Wembley in 2017 and was never called up since. And so since then, he's had a long struggle. So it was 6 years then between that call up and now. And so in those 5 or 6 years, he's been sort of trying to find his game, trying to really find out where he would fit in. And he's found something good at Bournemouth. So there's a part of me that thinks that I wouldn't, if I were in his shoes, I wouldn't want to stay. I'd want to keep proving myself at least for one more season and then maybe explore an option. But especially, if there's no real chance of him being called up by England sometime soon, especially as long as, the likes of Harry Kane and others are still very much in the picture. Why would I want to try and, jeopardize a good thing going on at Bournemouth? And we were interested in him, of course, as you know, because there has been talk about us possibly trying to go in for a striker rather than having to depend on Gabriel Jesus and Edward Nketiah, neither of whom have been prolific this season. There's still been talk about us trying to get Ivan Toney. I don't think that'll happen. And there's also some talk about how we're not really going to go for a striker. We're going to keep faith in what we have. It's completely muddled. And if I was Solanke, I'd say, no, I'm staying here at Bournemouth. So I also get the point that he does have a great number of years left on his contract with the Cherries. So it could be a good time in theory to cash in on him. But you are also right to say, no, he's our best player this season. He's been the one who's made us, play as well as we have. And he's been a big part of our revival in the middle part of the season. Why would we want to let him leave and put ourselves at risk? Especially since another one of your strikers, Antoine Semenyo, is also at the AFCON playing against Mohamed Salah tonight as we speak. In fact, an update from that match I can tell you is that Ghana are actually leading Egypt in an absolute shocker, really. This Egyptian team is a star-studded team. I believe they reached the final last time around, but failed to do so. West Ham United's Mohamed Kudus scoring in stoppage time at the end of the first half.
Aren't they, that just seem to have so much quality, but just lack that just edge. It's a bit like Belgium, really, to get themselves across the line.
Oh, you bet. And this team, mind you, have won so many African Cup of Nations tournaments. They weren't able to qualify for World Cups, but they did qualify in 2018. I think a large number of those players who were, some of those players, of course, who were stalwarts in that team, like Essam Al-Hadri, the goalkeeper, have since retired. But this is still a more than decent team. My own midfielder, Mohamed El Neni, is still a big part of that, despite not getting too much game time at Arsenal. And then, of course, you've got Hassan Fathy and a few others, Ahmed Hagazi. These names tend to roll off my tongue. Do forgive me for that. They've also got a player named Trezeguet, not that Trezeguet. But anyway, without digressing too far, I mentioned that Semenyo is in the Ghanaian squad, and I don't know if he is in fact starting tonight. Yes. So it's a Semenyo against Mohamed Salah, and at the moment, Semenyo seems to be coming out on top. So you can't afford to lose Solanke. I'm sorry, you can't. And if you do lose him, who can you get to replace him? So as far as Solanke is concerned, end of discussion. He's not for sale. Tell Arsenal and those big boys, Hands off our boy.
There we
And
go.
that goes for Chelsea too. If Chelsea are interested in him, you can very well say, to heck with you. You had him for a season or two. You never treated him properly. Why do you want him back? Off with you.
Exactly, mate. Exactly. You heard Manny there. Solanke is not for sale. Before we wrap up, let's cover off one other story as well that's coming out, which is FFP.
Oh,
Everton have been done again, as have Nottingham Forest, and Manchester City is delayed to a later date. They think it is going to be autumn 2024, by which time we'll be in the 24-25 season. There is uproar at the moment from the Everton fans, which I can fully understand exactly why there is uproar from them, because, you know, I would be fuming in that situation. Forest, I think, are taking it on the chin a little bit more, but of course, they haven't already had a 10 points deduction that Everton have. And of course, then there's the small question of Chelsea. The Premier League's in a mess, isn't it?
you bet. Absolutely. And it just goes to show that, you can buy your way to success, but in the long run, it will come back to bite you if you don't do things by the book. And the FFP issue, obviously, is something which is affecting quite a few other clubs in the Premiership. Obviously, the concerns surrounding FFP are what are affecting our activity. Well, I'll tell you what, if you're so concerned about FFP, do not think of shelling out 105 million quid to get Declan Rice,
Yeah.
which is admittedly, it's a good buy, but then spending about 70 million to get Kai Havertz in the team. 2 cups down the drain, Kai Havertz failed again and again. And, he's starting to score a few more goals and having people saying, oh, we really think that there's a player in him. To heck with that. He was stinking out the gaff at Chelsea. He's living off the memories of that Champions League final winning goal for quite some time now. And, there's just nothing in him that is really able to suggest to me that he can be good for us. It reminds me a lot of another German, Skodran Mustafi, who did really well at Euro 2016 for Germany. And I thought we were getting a really fine player on our books. And he turned out to be absolutely awful. And with regard to the FFP, it's always going to be a question of how wisely you spend your money. And we spent our money absolutely horribly in many cases. And it could affect us going forward if we're not careful. And, one of these days, Craig, our club is going to have an audit of our own finances to just find out, how we're spending our money and where the hell it's exactly going. And I sympathize in many ways with Everton because there's a part of me that thinks that they were, sold up the river by an overambitious owner who probably wanted too much too soon. And it's the same issues which affected Portsmouth a great deal because we all remember what happened to them. FA Cup winners under a certain Henry James Redknapp, but then sadly and tragically, the dream, turned into a nightmare. They went into administration. Despite reaching the FA Cup final again in 2010, they were relegated, and they went all the way down to I think are they in League One now or League Two?
They're League One. Yeah, League. Oh, well, they did go all the way down to League Two, and actually they were struggling down the bottom of it. And
Oh
the
yeah,
whole football
yeah.
pyramid needs looking at. You've got the situation at Reading, which of course I've covered extensively. Considering there is my roots there. The Everton situation is shambolic. How can you dock points for Everton when you've got a side like Manchester City with 115 charges? I think, to be honest, if the Premier League chief executive, Richard Masters, goes anywhere near Goodison Park, he's going to get absolutely lynched.
I don't know if you can necessarily say that, mate, but you're absolutely correct in saying that the anger that Everton fans will feel towards him will be justifiable. But and I agree with you there. I mean, it can't be selective justice for different clubs. You've got to have the same barometer being applied. And I think a lot of people, of course, have been licking their lips at the prospect of, City potentially losing some of their silverware. And it's happened before, mind you, because if you, I
Mm,
don't know if you might remember the early 90s and what happened to Marseille when
yeah.
it was found that they had apparently colluded with another club to influence the result of a game. They literally had the book thrown at them, and
Mm,
they lost a lot of their titles, I think. And I don't remember if they lost their titles, but I believe they were, of course, demoted, and they had to fight their way to come back. So if the Premier League are serious, they will, take the issues against Manchester City very seriously indeed. And if there are serious charges, they'll throw the book at them. I feel sad for Everton in a way, but as far as Forest are concerned, it's another sign that you earn promotion back to the Premier League after several years. You have this dream of wanting to really, 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 build on that and try and have a star-studded team and get some players to come and play for them. And this season, in fact, they've got the World Cup winner Gonzalo Montiel and
yeah.
another midfielder, Sangare from PSV, who is also at the AFCON with the Ivory Coast to play. And both of these guys could have played Champions League football for Sevilla and PSV this season, but instead they opted to slum it over in Nottingham. I think it might be because of the money, I don't know, but I would bet my right arm that if these charges come to fruition and Forest are affected, you're not going to see the likes of Montiel and Sangare staying there for much longer. No. And so it just goes to show that, you know how we have a saying that your eyes are bigger than your tummy?
Yeah.
You cannot afford to put more food on your plate than you can actually eat. And you cannot afford to try and do so much for the club in terms of buying players and expanding more when you don't have, the money. And it's a shame that all of these smaller clubs are falling foul of these, regulations, and they could end up being severely punished.
Hmm.
One part of me says that examples have to be made, but there's another part of me that says make an example of everyone. Don't just focus on the smaller clubs. And I really feel for Everton and how they were, sold a dream. I really feel for for the Forest fans, because it looks to me as though, I can't believe that Steve Cooper, when he was, manager at the time, had much of a role to play in all of this. And
No.
I mean, I wonder. I know that your longtime captain Steve Cook was there for a season, didn't necessarily go too well, and now he's
Yeah.
over at QPR. If you were to speak to him, he'd have a lot to say about the nonsense that's going on there. Maybe you could uh, have him come on for an interview and just ask him about his time at the club and how he felt over there, because I can't imagine he would have been too happy, to be honest.
Well, Marinakis, I don't know how many players he's brought in, but it's a ridiculous amount. But I'll tell you what, let's wrap it up there. Manny, it's great to have you back on, and we're going to make this more often. I know it's been very, very busy time, but yes, hopefully, fingers crossed, 3 points for the Cherries, 3 points for Arsenal as well coming up. And we shall see you in the next one. Remember to hit the subscribe bell, listen to us on Spotify, Apple Music. If you want to hear mine and Manny's dulcet tones, and we'll see you in the next video. Thanks for joining us, and see you soon.